Thank you. Well, welcome everybody for this presentation on mountain flowers of Britain. Supported again by Joe Begley, who you just heard there. Mountaineering Joe, some of you will know him as. He's going to deal with any technical issues, any latecomers. But again, if anyone has any questions during the presentation, if you can use the chat function, and then we can handle those questions at the end. So yeah, feel free to use that function there. The format's pretty much the same. Some of you have been on these before, so the format's pretty much the same as I like to kind of involve you as much as I can with these presentations. So there's a couple of quizzes which halfway through and at the end, which would be useful if you had a second device so you can play along with that activity. I've also got a giveaway at the end, a couple of packs of cards to give away. So, but yes, the presentation itself, hopefully you'll see my presentation there. What this is all about, obviously mountain flowers, taking a look at some of the species, about 20 species that I'll profile through the evening. Look at some interesting facts, and it's often the facts as well as the key identification features. It's often the facts and the fun information and the kind of mythology behind the flower, which is the thing that we remember. And it's kind of and it's that hook which is a kind of a key to your memory really of learning. We'll also have a look at a bit of geology as well and some of the background. A few people have asked questions in the past about how does geology affect flowers? Well, it has quite a significant effect. So I'm running off my notes as well. So in the mountain environment, we have a variety of rocks. We have some pale rocks, which you can see on the one on the left has got lots of quartz and silica in that. We term that as being an acidic rock, which is rich in silica. And then the rock on the right-hand side is a base-rich rock, which is poor in silica. And geologists talk about acid and basic rocks. And it is a bit confusing, but these are terms referring to igneous rocks, so lavas and so on. Chemists also use the term acid and basic, referring to pH. Okay, but in the geological context, we'll just take a look at that a little bit further, because it has quite a significant part. So here in North Wales, there's the example I've got here is Clogwyn y Person on Snowdon Massif, and it's you can see there's a red line there defining two layers of rock. So we've got an upper layer of rock there, which is very different in color and nature than the lower one. And the upper one is acidic, and it's base rich. It's acidic, so it's silica-rich rock, sometimes known as felsic rock. Some of you may know your geology and your chemistry. So silica and felspar minerals, they're light in color and they've got a relatively low density, whereas the layers below are basic, so they're poor in silica, so they've got other elements and minerals in there, so they're more magnesiums, ions, which come out as a dark color and higher density, so the specific gravity, and they're known as mafic rocks. So looking at geology there, I was up there with Mike Rain, we were looking for alpine flowers, and it's the geology that drives our searching for these flowers. So we were in these base rich layers below the rhyolite, which is an extrusive lava that's come out from an underwater volcano as it happens, and below a different layer of is known as a bedded pyroclastic. So it's volcanic lavas, extrusive rocks again, but they're base rich, and it was in those layers that we were looking for certain flowers. So that's a little bit of a clue to how I would look into the mountains to try and find certain species. So chemistry and geology plays quite an important part, as does water. So water, as you can see here, again, a North Wales focus. We've got a spring-fed flush, so a very, very base-rich or water-rich flush full of mosses. So in the foreground, we've got lots of water flowing down there, lots of mosses there and grasses. And then in the distance, you can see this quite barren hill slope, thin soils, grassy, and you know, lots of scree and rock there. So there are very, very big stark differences. So water plays a big important part along that. Example, you might see heath dog violet on a drier moor, whereas in a wet moor you might see a marsh violet. Very similar species, closely related, but they have distinct characteristics. The marsh violet has a big round leaf, but essentially if you find the marsh violet, you're going to get your feet wet. So that's quite a significant part there. And as well, just finally looking at another aspect of the environment, geologically is quite significant as well, because we get relief, so we get angle. So here you can see these flat layers, and then you've got these steep cliffs here. So on there you can't form soil. On here water will accumulate, and the water will flow down and flush down here, bringing minerals with it. So you're really looking for aspect where you can find flowers. You might find them on inaccessible ledges, in the crevices of these rocks here, but it all has a big interplay with where you find certain species. These rocks are very dark in colour, whereas the rocks in the background are very pale in colour, so that might be a key as well, what you can find where. So that's a little bit of a summary there. Take a look at that view there, and with this kind of observational skills there, what do you see in that image? What do you notice? You might notice clouds, you might see some sheep, a water channel, you might see a beautiful valley. Now, what do you think when you look at that view? You may think, I will summarize, it's very difficult when we're not together, but you may think there's lots of grazing. You might think it's possibly wet on the summits up there, it's a bit cloudy. You might think it's pretty. Now, what do you wonder about that? What does it make you wonder? You might wonder where the water's going. You might wonder why there are different colours in the vegetation. You might wonder what it might be like without sheep. So all these things have a big interplay of what's going on. And it's really honing the skills of observation that we're going to develop tonight, which will help you to see these flowers in maybe hopefully a different light. So we want to become flower ninjas. So to become a flower ninja, you've got to identify maybe the shape of the flower, look at the leaf. We've talked about habitat for the last 5 minutes. Maybe altitude has a big part to play. This presentation will be available at the end. I will share it with you, so don't worry about trying to keep up with everything. There will be a lot of information, but basically in a summary image of a flower, you get the beautiful, often coloured petals. You get little things called sepals which encase the flower. And then within a flower, you get the reproduction aspect. So this is a female reproductive part. This is the male reproductive part. I don't want to talk about names at the moment. It's more observational. The words can come, but the words are all there on that image. Now, very quick look at reproduction in flowers. Here's a flower from North Wales. You've got in the center, can you see the female reproductive structure? And then the outer, there are 10 of these filaments around the outside with these beautiful orange heads there, and that's the male reproductive part. How about this image? Common sedge. We've got 2 different flowers here. There's actually, this is a female flower, and that is a male flower. So they're on the same plant, but they're separated from each other. Take a look at that image. Could you distinguish male and female? It's a bit of a trick question because that is a female plant, and the one next to it here on the right this is the male plant. So we've got starry saxifrage, common sedge, and then we've got mountain everlasting. And so sometimes ecology is not always that straightforward. You get some plants where the male and female parts are on the same plant. Monoecious it's called. It means a single home. Eisia is a fancy Greek word, and it means homes. So ecology is really the study of where things live. Ecology comes from that word. And on that plant, we have two homes. So maybe you have separate plants where the males and females are from. So we'll just run through very briefly some of the features that we might talk about tonight. Leaf margins. So is it lobed? Or is it smooth? Is it saw-edged? Are the leaves arranged in like a base rosette or in a ring of leaves, or alternately? Is it a lance-shaped leaf? Is it kidney-shaped? Is it a heart-shaped leaf? So all these different terms are just descriptive, and then you might get a cluster of flowers all together in a head. This example is a single flower and a base rosette of leaves. So that would be a description for that species. Three families we'll just take a brief look at now, just a very brief look. 2,500 species in the rose family. They have this pattern of symmetry, which is known as radial symmetry. Wild strawberry, we find that in the mountains, so it's relative to what we do. Generally, the roses have edible fruits. So you've got strawberries, apples, peaches, cherries, and strawberries. The cultivated roses in your garden have multiple petals, not just 5, but they're very decorative and they're very fragrant as well. But they've been honed for thousands of years and cultivated by horticulturalists to form these flowers. So that a classic rose has 5 petals, but the ones in your garden have been modified by horticulturalists. So they generally have jagged leaves and thorns, generally as a characteristic. A pea family, another reason why we're putting this flower in is because it's got a very distinct shape flower. And instead of having a radial pattern, it's got a bilateral or a book or mirror image shape flower, as you can see there. So a clover, the red clover there, is a flower head of maybe 80 of individual little flowers. You've got leaves which are divided up, and they're individual big flowers there you can see on that veg. And then you have this classic pea pod. So this is a huge flower family, very important for chickpeas, peanuts, alfalfa, lentils, and so on. They all have this ability to fix nitrogen in their roots, so they can live in very poor soils, and they have a little bacteria that lives in the root structure, and that can take atmospheric nitrogen, break it down, and then make nitrates, and they can feed that to the plant. So it's a really amazing symbiosis that it's formed with these little bacteria. So that's common with the pea family. And then the third family we'll look at is the daisy family, probably one of the most advanced flower families, evolutionary wise, but it's also one of the most diverse, and you find them all over the world. You find the classic lettuce, you might have a salad like that's a part of the daisy family. Sunflowers as well for the oil and seeds. Chamomile, you might drink that. Echinacea, artichokes, they're all members of this family, and they all have a thing in common, which is this central radial pattern. They have these central discs and these outer rays, and they're all tiny flowers. So each one of these is a tiny little flower, so it's a composite head. Classic daisy there, and then the seeds are winged and spiny generally as a general characteristic. And the leaves can be simple, like on a daisy, or they can be thorny, like on that marsh thistle there. So that's a look at some of the families that we find. Now we're going to look at some of the plants that we find in the mountains. So this is where we get into the nitty-gritty of the presentation. The first species we're going to find there, you can see the frilly lower 3-lobed lip, and it has an upper lip. So it has it would have this mirror-like symmetry. It's called lousewort. It's in flower at the moment. It's part of a family called broomrake, which are all parasitic. Now, lousewort is parasitic, but it can choose to be parasitic, or you can see it's got green leaves, so it can actually photosynthesize as well. So it's one of these kind of interesting species. Small flower, I took this photo the other day, so they're in flower now. If you find one, you'll often find a cluster of them, but some days I'll walk, not see any of them. But where you find one, you often find many. this presentation will be for you at the end. So the interesting thing we can look at now are the facts. So the lousewort, it was thought to give cows lice as an old belief. Not true, but it's hemiparasitic. So basically, its roots, basically, they have this structure in the root, an organ, and it makes the host plant, their roots, make a structure which allows them to nick their food, basically. So they can just steal food from the roots of another plant. That plant might not let them, but it might let them. And if it does let them, then that will be a parasitic plant. Agricultural weeds, many agricultural weeds are, well, a lot of the broom rapes are big pests around the world for agriculture. So that's a little bit about that. But this next flower is absolutely exotic. It's beautiful, in flower at the moment. It'll be out of flower soon. You can see the starry white flower with these beautiful white hairs. The lower flowers are in flower at the moment, and then as you go up this flower head, they're not quite in flower, so it will develop as it goes up. The leaves are divided into three, and it looks like a broad beam. So this is known as, because it's in the bog, known as a bog bean. It's got a species name, so I might know it as bog bean, someone else might know it as a different plant, but it has a species name. Again, a wetland plant, fairly small, flowers until June. It creeps underground, so this rhizome, a bit like a ginger root, it will just keep creeping. So where you find one, you'll find many of them. It's known as bog hop because it was used to flavour beer as well. And its Latin name, where you can see it's trifoliate, 3 leaves. Menianthus, menian is a Greek for disclosing. And basically these flowers are kind of revealing or disclosing as it goes up. And I think that's where the name of that plant has come from. Anther comes from flower, so it's revealing the flower. This plant is absolutely stunning again. It's like an Alice in Wonderland flower, I think. It looks like a buttercup, and it is a buttercup, one of the biggest ones you'll see, and it's got a globe-like flower with many, these are sepals, and they form a globe around the petals. So the petals you won't see, these are very bright, colourful sepals, and the little tiny insects will go inside and take a long time to get in there and get trapped and get attracted by the nectar, and then pollinate the flower. So it's that holding those sepals close increases the chance of the pollination. So it's globe flower, it's part of the buttercup family. Again, we're in the wet, marshy areas, fens, wood, damp rock crevices. Trolleus, its Latin name, Trolleus, comes from German for toll, which is a globe or globular. They don't like hot weather really, so very much the mountain species, but damp rock ledges, and again stunning, away from grazing animals often. They do contain, they have a bitter taste. The buttercups have a lot of poisonous or very active compounds which become poisonous, and it's got one here which has got a fancy name, protonammonins, which if you touched it would produce a blister on your skin. So yeah, just again a word of caution when we're looking at these flowers. Bogs seem to have an amazing display of colours and beautiful flowers. So this flower here, you may or may not know it. In July, you'd see a bog awash with this flower. See, it's got 6 star-like petals that come out, and that's a characteristic of a lily, although it's now not classified as a lily. It used to be, but it's not anymore. Some of you may know it. I'm going to hold the name for a second. It was used as a cheap form of saffron because of the colour. It was used as a yellow hair dye. Can you see here that central wine-shaped female reproductive organ, and then the outer, the male reproductive, really frilly with the pollen up the top there. So you can look at the flower, and description, going back to that image and that diagram, it's an absolute classic of that. And you can learn the names later. I don't want to overwhelm with lots of names. But it's called bog asphodel. Some of you knew that, some of you might not know that. It's just starting to come into flower just now, but next month in July, it will be awash in bogs. Its name, narthesin, is an active compound. It's a saponin, like a soapy compound. Taken internally is very destructive to liver and kidney functions. So it is actually a poison to both sheep and cows. That's the description. Another interesting fact, ossifragum, its name, ossifragum, ossia, to do with bones, and fragum is fragile, and it was thought that cows and sheep eating it would get brittle bones, but really it's more to do with the nutrient poor bog environment that they're grown in that causes that problem. Round-leaf sundew, very, very small, very hard to see unless you really get down to it. It's got round leaves, rotundifolia. It's sundew family, wet bogs and fens. And what's interesting is it's an insectivorous plant. And I've got a short video now, which will just 30 seconds, and it will just show how this carnivorous plant dissolves and absorbs the nutrients out of an insect on a time lapse. Just before we do that, you can see its world distribution. It's such a widespread cosmopolitan species. It's found from America to Kamchatka in Russia. So it's got these sticky secretions, sugary secretions. I've heard it being called the crimson carnivore because it's a beautiful crimson color. So it'll suck the nutrients out, digest them, and move on. So the world of living in a bog, very poor nutrients available, or low levels of nutrients available to plants. And here another insectivorous plant. I love the Welsh name for this. Tabod y gorse, which is the tongue of the bog. And if you can roll your tongue, you can see the lime green leaf there. And again, it exudes kind of sugary compounds that digest and absorb, and acids as well. And these secretions digest the food from their prey. It's called a butterwort, Pinguicula vulgaris. And again, I got a short video of this. Plant sometimes has a single flower, like you see there. Sometimes you have two flowers popping out from it. Flowers right through till July. Beautiful deep violet with this great long pointed spur at the back. The leaves have been used to curdle or thicken milk, and the name comes from the fact that the plant is a protector of milk and butter and was used to rub on cows' udders, according to legend. Here's the short video of this. Hopefully will play with a poor ant meal that unable to escape. So those sugary secretions, enzymes and acids and all sorts of things, it's a pretty gruesome world in these bogs, nutrient poor environments. But these adaptations are incredible. Sundew is rated to the Venus flytrap, and you know we've heard about these charismatic species, but we've got them ourselves in our mountain environment. But we'll move away from the grim, murky life of insectivorous plants, but we'll stay in the wetland. So this is a classic wetland heath species of a heather, and the characteristic is it's got a ring, a wall of 4 leaves. So these leaves are in a ring of 4, there's another ring of 4, and they're cross-leaved, and it's a heath plant, so it's cross-leaved heath. It loves water. Blooming right now at the moment. And it's the giveaway for its name is the description of the leaf on the stem. So it has a cluster of flowers at the top only. Okay, so that's a characteristic of that. And the sticky hairs that you see is quite a hairy plant. It thought Charles Darwin suspected it to be carnivorous because of those hairs. It's not true, but that's what he thought. And it's an evergreen plant. We're going to look at one more, and then we're going to have a break for a quiz. So this, you may know or may not know what this is. I showed a photo earlier. There's a central female reproductive organ, then the outer ones, and here the red one, as it's developing into a fruit. So it's already fertilized and it's developing into a fruit. Starry saxifrage, found in wet springs, flushes, beautiful spear-shaped petals in the star shape, two little greeny yellow dots on them. Likes bases, likes minerals, but also likes acidic conditions, as long as there's water involved. And it will spread underground it produces little rosettes of leaves and grows and grows. Its other name is hairy kidneywort, which may relate to the fact that it could dissolve kidneys, or kidney stones, sorry. Saxifraga, saxatile is rocks, and fraga is to break. So that may be alluding to one of its names or its functions. So that's a distribution map. So again, where the Highlands of Britain are, Scotland, Northern England, Wales, that's where you find this. We are going to jump to a quiz now. So if you have your phone handy, if you've not tried this before, punch in on a web browser, www.kahoot.it, and we will jump into a quiz. You'll be prompted to give put in a PIN code. This quiz is looking at mosses and club mosses. So it's just something that we're not going to look at during the presentation, but I just thought we'd add it into the presentation. So punch in 333719. And if you can't play along with it with your phone, don't worry, you can still play along and test yourselves. There's some yes/no answers, and there's some multiple choice. Okay, the code will carry on. So if you haven't got in, the code is at the bottom. So 5 questions, the quicker you are to answer, the more points you'll get. Bit of a clue there in the picture. So yes, it is true. A bit of a giveaway. High oil content in club mosses. Well done, David. The quicker you answer, the more points you get. So true or false? Club mosses once formed tropical forest during the Carboniferous era. Very fast answers. That's good. Fantastic. It is true. Up to 40-meter tall species in the carbon, oxygen-rich environment of Carboniferous. So sponge with antiseptic properties. There's a picture there to help you. Yes, sphagnum, it's a classic one. Yeah, antiseptic properties. David's still out in the lead, well done. A moss believed to dissolve gall and bladder stones. There's a picture of it. Made a tea was made. I don't believe it actually did do anything for gall and bladder stones. But star moss is correct. A lot of you knew that. Well done, David, still up in the lead. So 5 Mosses have roots, true or false? Yeah, they don't have true roots as such. They hold into the ground, but they don't have true roots which absorb nutrients and bring them up into the plant. So they don't have roots as such. Well done. 5 out of 5. Some fantastic results there with 5 out of 5. Well done, David. I just have to stop for a second. I need to close those windows down. I can't. Okay, we get back to the presentation. Okay, back into it. So we've looked at wet mountain environments and bogs and wet flushes and such. Now we've got a dozen plants we'll look at now of the dry heaths and mountains. So these prefer dry. Some of them may prefer acid or alkaline conditions, but we'll look at those now. This is a classic heath plant. Again, it's the most famous of the heath flowers. Lots of nectar. Again, you have rings of leaves up the walls of leaves, but you have these classic bell flowers, but not just at the top. They actually start to come down the stem as well. So we've got a different species, but it's bell heather. Unlike cross-leaved heath, only likes dry and well-drained soil environments, even chalky soils. So it's like acidic soils, chalky soils, as long as they're leached and well-drained. So you're not going to see this and cross-leaved heath living at the same time. They've just come into flower and they're looking fantastic in the heaths at the moment. Interesting fact about heath plants is that they developed a special relationship with fungi, which are known as a mycorrhizal relationship. And some of these fungi actually grow inside and between plant root cells. And fungi, if you're not aware of what fungi do, they will decompose and break down organic matter in the soil. So they will forage for food and they bring it and they can pass it to the roots of the plant. The plants photosynthesize, make sugar, and give the sugar to the fungi. So there's an exchange of nutrients for sugars, and they live in this symbiotic association. And so there's very specific fungi that you associate with heathers, but heathers can't survive without these. Many plant species can't survive without their mycorrhizal associations either. Another heath plant, which is a very common and very widespread heather plant. You see the shape of the, I'll just bring my pointer. The flower is open now. It's not like a closed bell, and the leaves are like cypress scales and they're pressed against the stem. So it's a very different in nature to the previous flowers that we saw there with those closed bells, and now we've got these open bells. It is again in the heath family. It's ling or heather, if you weren't sure what that was. The most widespread, it's the only species which is within this group called Calluna. Again, in the heather family, acidic conditions, so it likes nutrient poor conditions. It can be found on dry habitats, it can be found on wet habitats. So it's very widespread. It regenerates so quickly after burning. It makes it great for grazing moorlands or grouse moorlands. Quite a robust woody shrub, long-lived, evergreen. And as I said, it's got scale-like flat leaves. So its name Calluna comes from Greek, which means to clean, or to brush or to sweep clean, and that's where its name has come from. So we're staying within the heather family, but we're moving on to some of the berries now. This you may know as blaeberry, whortleberry, whinberry, huckleberry, or in Welsh, llys. The stems are green, you can see that, and they're photosynthetic. So when the leaves drop off in the autumn, these stems are still photosynthetic. Won't see the flower now, but you will start to see, and they're a bit sharp and a bit tart at the moment, but the bilberry. So it's got a beautiful edible berry, as we've seen there, heather family, acid heaths, bogs, open woodlands. Again, fairly robust plant. It's flowered already. It's now the berry season, which is great news. So we can go out harvesting all the berries. They've got lots of pectin, great for making jams, flavouring liqueurs. And apparently they contain a compound, an active compound, which allegedly helps improve night vision by increasing the blood flow into the retinal capillaries. So it's been shown to assist with that, and it's got some impact on diabetics as well, with vision as well. Apparently it's got something that's been tested, and it's an interesting line of kind of research in there. Another closely related species to the bilberry is this plant here, which has a red berry, but it's earlier in the season. It's got this beautiful frilly white flower, this open bell. It's an evergreen shrub. Scotland, Wales, Northern England, again, cold environments. You'll find it up to 1,000 meters in altitude. Those flowers often self-pollinate. It's called the cowberry. Heather family, sunny, acidic, screes, shallow soils. It's a hardy species. Again, evergreen, dark leathery leaves. The berries are edible, but they're not very tasty. The leaves are poisonous, as are the bilberry leaves. So just be careful with that plant. But they are antiseptic. The leaves have an antiseptic quality. So there we go. And it's also very fire resistant. So this plant is very similar. It's another berry, very similar in the heath family to the cowberry. But can you see the leaf of the cowberry is quite big, wide, like a cow's foot? This one's got a leaf which is very narrow, a bit more like a crow's foot. And actually the leaf is rolled underneath. And you can see where it's joined, there's a white line on the underside of the leaf where it's rolled under. It makes it look more succulent. The flowers are not so easy to see on this, they're tiny, and they're only on the female plant. So you'll only get the berries on the female plant. So that's a good fact to tell people if you see this, this plant. And they'll develop from a red to a blackish berry, and it's a crowberry. Crow's feet, narrow, and the cowberry is, a cow, it'll have a wide foot. So the leaf is kind of in the name, I think is quite a useful way of distinguishing between the two. It's well-drained acidic mountain heath. Again, it's flowered already. It's a woody. It's found quite high in elevation as well. You find it in Greenland, circumpolar distribution. So it's a broad range. Its scientific name, Empetrum, literally means growing on rocks. And as mentioned earlier, the edible berries, they have this compound in called anthocyanin, which has an antioxidant effect on the body. So it's quite healthy. So blackberries, bilberries, raspberries, so on. There's lots of berries, even beetroots and sweet potato and so on. They have these anthocyanins, flavonoids, which are pigments, which have these health benefits. So also good for dyeing. So it's some of these plants with these dark berries have been used for dyeing cloth and leather as well. So we moved away from the heath plants and we're getting into some of the other heath species. This one, 4 petals, they're white. It's quite a sickly sweet scent that you get from this. It's got a ring of leaves here, a ring of leaves here. So this characteristic of a ring of leaves is on a closely related species you find in the hedgerows, and you throw it on your mate and it will stick to their clothes. So you've got cleavers or sticky willy, goosegrass, related to that species, but it's found in the heath. This plant is heath bedstraw. Characteristics, you've got those rings of leaves. It likes acidic conditions. Again, in flower at the moment, a bit sick. Some people say it's a sickly scent. It's a sweet scent anyway. It's flowering right at the moment, and it's crawling all over the heath as they're quite low, up around there where I live in North Wales. The name Gallium is Greek for milk, and it refers to the fact that the flowers of the lady's bedstraw were used to curdle milk when making cheese. This is a photo of lady's bedstraw, which has got again a beautiful heady scent, and it was used to stuff straw mattresses as well to make beds smell nicer. You find that alkaline soils, you do find it in the mountains, but more likely on the coast and in grasslands low down. So they're bedstraw species, but the heath one is the main one. Classic bellflower, or little bells, they're called in Italian, they'd be campanula, so the harebell, with a round leaf, a rotundifolia. They are found everywhere. They're found from dry chalk grasslands to heaths to dunes. They're found everywhere, but only on dry soil. So if you want to navigate, keep your feet dry, then have a look out for those harebells, and you'll keep your feet dry. There's some information there. It's known as the bluebell of Scotland, and the stems ooze a milky white latex. You can just see that just there, little white latex. Not known to be a problem if it gets in contact with the skin. Not meant to be harmless. So there's a plant from the mint family. If you were to tread on it, you'd certainly smell it. Maybe at the moment, it's really in bloom and beautiful to see. A close-up of the flower. It's got this symmetry like a mirror image again. So you've got these lower lip is 3 lobes, and then you've got this upper lip, but it's an aromatic plant in the mint family. You might have already guessed it, wild thyme. Thymus seraphyllum, dry grasslands, heaths, especially chalky, so calcium-loving plant. Low growing, creeping, it'll flower right through till August. The aromatic fragrances have been used in syrups and to treat sore throats and colds and things. But there's an oil, an essential oil, which gives it the aroma called thymol, which is antibacterial and antifungal. And it's actually been used as well to try and control the varroa mite in bee colonies. So it's got multiple uses. This species here, very common, and a lot of these plants aren't necessarily easy to spot because they're low down and we often walk over and it's a field of green. But when you look closely down below, you'll see all these bright colours, and these at the moment are absolutely stunning. They can be blue, they can be white, they can be purple, or they can be pale blue. And they're all a species. There is a species that lives, it's exactly the same. It lives in a wet area. And the only difference between the common milkwort and the heath milkwort are the leaves on the stem. They're either alternate on the stem or they're opposite on the stem. But they both perform this huge colour change. But if your feet are dry, it's more likely common milkwort. If you're in a wet, boggy area, it's more likely heath milkwort. If you wanted to identify it down, looking at the leaves, then you can do that if you wanted to as well. But the flower itself, you can see these are like big bunny ears. There's one on the one side and there's one on the other, and they are sepals. And this is the flower itself. The petals are in here. So small white flower, but these great big 2 large sepals, which are the very colourful part of that plant. Polygala, vulgaris. Polygala means much milk in Greek. Vulgaris is common. Acid heaths, spreading stems. Again, look really closely down low, and you'll see them in grasslands. So the Greek, meaning much milk, is a reputation for increasing milk flow in cattle. And medieval herbalists prescribed common milkwork to nursing mothers in the belief that it made milk more abundant as well. So it's got a link. If you think about the word gala and galaxy, Milky Way, and that's that word. So if you ever do see gala, then it's got that link with milk. This species is absolute stunning. It's a very elegant, tall plant with this fantastic flower, which, if you remember back to what we talked about earlier, could you guess the family? It's one of those three that I described earlier. Radiating rays, central disc. It's called goldenrod, and it's a member of the daisy family. And the Asteraceae means star. Aster is a star, so it's got that star-shaped flower. It's got a range of habitats, but it must be dry, so free draining. It can be acidic soils, lowlands to uplands, so it's fairly common. It's got a good medicinal history. So it's got lots of active compounds in it. So there's saponins, which are soapy compounds, flavonoids. It's got anti-inflammatory properties, analgesic, diuretic properties. It's a great dye as well for clothing. In the olden days, you get brown, yellow, and orange dyes from it. Its Latin name, solidago, comes from to make whole, essentially. So it's a wholesome, restorative, with many active compounds which help with those ailments. We're going to look at two species to finish off with. This one is a fairly ubiquitous flower that you'll find everywhere in the mountains. You might think, with the shape of its leaves, that it's part of the buttercup family, but it's actually part of the rose family, but with only 4 petals. So it's a bit unusual, but this, you'll find it growing all over heaths. It's called tormental, which in Latin means minor pain. So it alludes to its kind of medicinal functions. Potentilla erecta. So potent means strong and powerful. So it's the plants of the potentilla, the cinquefoils, have been a long history of use for medicinal properties. Wet and dry heaths, acid heath meadows, so a range of habitats. It's a great companion as a mountaineer because it accompanies you on so many of the environments that we kind of, and habitats that we walk through. There's a description of it, 4-notched petals. The roots contain lots of tannins, again, active compounds. Those of you who came on a workshop I did earlier, we talked about active compounds, medicinal plants. Tannins are one of these active compounds. Used for tanning leather, and it's also, a red dye was made from the roots because of this tannin, so it's used to dye leather and fabrics. Potentilla, as I said, means potent or strong, and the word erecta on that, some people have told me incorrectly that it's meant to help with some anecdotal evidence of some bodily function, but it's not. It means upright. But the next plant, and the last one we're going to look at, does have some effect on enhancing your libido. It increases the sex drive, apparently, according to the Norwegians. And in Finland, it's known as northern ginseng. It's great for boosting energy and reducing blood sugar. So it's got a long history of use, and you can buy capsules and all sorts of things from this. Lots of research in this. The roots, if you ever found a plant that's been washed down and after a winter storm, you break the roots, it smells of roses, and that gives the name of this plant, which is rose root. It's not a rose, but it's a member of the I'll get it in a second, the stonecrop family. So it's a succulent. So the leaves are succulent, and in Welsh, it's known as danoedd, which means toothache, and it was meant to assist with, by eating the leaves, it would help you with if you had toothache. So again, that's a local medicinal kind of use of it. Damp rocky mountain ledges and screes, anywhere that the grazing animals can't get to, essentially. So you got to look up high sometimes onto these damp ledges. It's pretty sturdy plant, and its rose-scented roots have been used as a perfume, and as I mentioned, it's been a medicinal herb, which has still lots of research that's gone on with it. In America, there have been clinical trials for its use as a mild antidepressant as well. But that's one of our Arctic alpine species. I haven't really touched on many Arctic alpine species of the mountains because they're not so common to come across. But we've had starry saxifrage, roseroot, cowberry, even, you know, they're Arctic alpine. They got this circumpolar habitat. So they're found right across the northern hemisphere, some wide-ranging environments that they're from, and close at home in our local mountains. So I wasn't sure how long that would take. It's 8 minutes to 7. So I've done, timing has been pretty good for that. Got one last Kahoot, if you fancy getting involved with this, on ferns and lichens, because we haven't touched ferns and lichens. I haven't looked at grasses either yet. We're not going to actually today. But ferns and lichens, too much to fit into 1 hour. So if you type in kahoot.it again, we will try and have a look at the code. The pin will come up. So if you type in 461065, that's great. I'll make a start with that now. So are you ready? 5 questions on ferns and lichens. A lichen known as British soldier, and there's a picture. Swan Vesta, Little Red Riding Hood, Fairy Blobs, or is it Devil's Matchsticks? And it is Devil's Matchsticks. Well done, Roz. True or false? Rhizocarpon is only found on acidic rocks. Well done, it is. Yeah, so that's another mineral dependent or silica rich loving. Rubes, well done, getting in the lead. Reindeer moss is a moss, true or false? There's a picture. Latin name's Cladonia something or other. That might be a bit of a giveaway. It's false. It's a lichen. True or false again? Crottle is a type of lichen. It was used to make a red dye. Brilliant, yes, it is true. I don't know how long ago or when. Final question, True or false? Parsley fern is edible. Don't want to get this wrong. It does look like parsley fern, but it's not edible. Please don't try and eat it. Okay, so let's have a quick look at the scores. 5 out of 5. Well done, Emma. Superb effort. Well done, Sarah. And Mark, well done. You don't win anything, I'm afraid, for getting that right, but bit of pride that you know you got 5 out of 5. So we are near the end, not quite at the end. I've got a couple more webinars coming up. One next week, looking at alpine flowers, and then the week after, Paul Gannon's going to come back again, and geology for hill walkers. We're going to look at Snowdonia and the Lake District compared. He's going to compare and contrast the geology of the two regions. So if you'd like to sign up for those, again, it's this time on a Thursday evening. Hopefully come the autumn, we'll have be able to get back in the hills and get back on with running workshops. But there's ways to stay in touch there. I've got a giveaway, as I said now. So I'll put all your names into Wheel of Fortune, and one person, you're going to have to email me at the end, give me your address. You're going to win a pack of wildflower playing cards. Someone else is going to win a pack of Trump flower cards. And now you're going to find out who are the two lucky winners. But please contact me at the end. So here we go. Fingers crossed. Looks like Craig Ruxton. Well done, Craig. And then one more spin. Who's it going to be? Ooh, David, well done. There you go. There you go. Please let me know, and I will get those off to you in the next post. So don't want to play that again. I'm trying to move on the slide. So there we are. Before we do review and feedback, I don't know, Joe, were there any questions that we could, or you could actually, if you wanted to, if you were to type in www.menti.com, then you'll be prompted to enter a code, and there's 3 slides, and if you could just quick review, we'll look at those in a minute, but while you're doing that, maybe there's some questions that's come up, and Joe, I don't know, is there anything that's...
You did actually answer quite a few questions, I noticed. I think somebody asked good locations for rose roots.
Geology.
Like
Look, follow the dark, the base-rich rocks. Come Glass, Mawr is good in North Wales. Lake District, there's some great areas for in the lakes on the more inaccessible, steeper cliffs around Helvellyn and in those valleys up there. And some of the gills in the lakes as well, the base-rich gills where it's inaccessible. I don't really know Scotland in the summer.
Yeah. Louse wort. Somebody asked about it.
Which one?
Plants that it's parasitic on. The louse wort.
Oh, they're parasitic on.
Yeah.
I don't know actually. I think anything that
allows it.
The plants live in a community, so in a marsh environment, it will try and get in the roots of plants. Those plants will either allow it or not allow it. And I don't know if they're the specific hosts or if they're just general hosts, but they try and get the host to produce this chemical which allows them to attach onto them. So it's a chemical response they're requiring. So I don't know exactly if, I don't think it's specific. I think it's quite general within that community, but it's a good question. I don't know the answer. I can see bilberries can be eaten raw. Any of these questions that I miss, I will email later on when I review it all and send it out to you. So I'll go on to this review if there's nothing else there. We'll just have a quick look at what people's feedback is there. So the first is a word cloud, informative, interesting. And these will pop up. I will stick them on my Facebook Facebook site later on. So thank you very much for taking part with all of this. It's worthwhile. That's great to hear. Excellent ratings again. Thank you very much. Grasses, sedges. Great move to online. Great work. Pitch right level. Thank you. It's always difficult to know the audience in a way and how much to put in and what words to leave out. So thank you very much for your feedback there. That code 945567 will be valid for another day or so. So when I send this out send it out as a link to the Google Slides later on, if you care to, you're very welcome to. It's really useful for me to have your feedback there. So thank you again. I'm going to stop sharing that. Yeah, if there's no questions really from anyone about 7 o'clock, I don't know how I do it every week. It's brand new presentations and they always end up at about the right time. So thank you all very much for coming along again. Really appreciate it. I love putting all these webinars together, and to see it's appreciated is wonderful. So thank you all very much. Hopefully see you again. And yeah, I will be in touch later on. Have a lovely evening, everyone. Thank you very much.